What's up, world? I'm Matt Newberg from Hungary, and this is The Feed. Each episode, we'll dive into conversations with the industry insiders who are leveraging technology to shape the way we eat. On today's episode of The Feed, I sat down with Micahel Robinov, co-founder and CEO of Farm to People, a New York City-based grocery delivery service that procures fresh produce, meat, dairy, and more directly from local farmers. In this episode, we'll talk about sourcing products from sustainably grown purveyors, the unit economics powering its delivery service, and the future of hyperlocal decentralized food production and distribution. All right, Micahel, it's awesome to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time. I'd love to just kind of kick it off and get a sense of your background and like how you founded Farm to People over a decade ago and just kind of the founding story, how you came across the problem that you're now solving today.
Thank you so much, Matt, for having me on today. I think the journey of Farm to People is definitely like a long and winding one with many pivots. I think like it's crazy to think back on the past decade because really we were a company that, or I would like when I think about like where I was personally, like I had taken a gap year from university. Prior to that, my only like real work experience had been at the farmer's market and as a babysitter. But I was passionate about food since long before my professional career began. And that's really, due to the fact that my father, who is a co-founder of the business, is a serial entrepreneur in his own right and someone who has been at the forefront of, the natural, first, even before organic existed, the natural product industry in food. He was a retailer for about 20 years, and then he went into CPG, created his own line of Mediterranean imported goods called Mediterranean Organic with a co-founder of his, and then has also been an angel investor and mentor to other CPGs. And so a lot of our, like dinner table conversation, and a lot of the people that, I would get a chance to meet as a kid and as an adolescent were folks that were within the food industry. And so the type of school I went to was also a Waldorf school. I don't know if you're familiar with Waldorf school, but the same individual who created the Waldorf education also created biodynamic farming. So it's a fun little parallel there, which biodynamic farming, if you know anything about that, is very similar and has a lot of crossover with regenerative farming, which, also like harkens back to, indigenous farming. And so there's a lot of roots there that are interesting. But not to get too far off topic, a lot of the folks that, we got to meet, and then a lot of the holidays that my family took were really business trips for my dad, but they were to farms in Greece or factories in Calabria. And so I never really realized how fortunate I was to be as connected as I was to the food industry until I was at NYU and working at the farmer's market, and really like that parallel of this amazing food that was being trucked down from the Hudson Valley that I was selling to the dorm food and the lack of a kitchen and the sort of disconnect of my food that I was experiencing at college, kind of for the first time in my life because of, again, that very like fortunate food-focused upbringing was really jarring. And so one of the conversations my dad was having a lot with friends of his was how difficult it was now for small brands like he had been a decade or so earlier to break out into, big distribution channels. And I've heard some of your prior guests talk about that as well. The idea that small brands are expected to pay slotting fees and shelf space and distribution deals. And so that was like this one conversation. And then you're at the farmer's market where and Smorgasburg, which had just started back then. And you're seeing this kind of revolution of small makers and small farmers creating just amazing products, but it was really, really hard to find them anywhere. And so that was sort of the seed for the idea of Farm to People, was to create a new platform that really connected individuals that wanted to eat this way directly with the source of their food, and to really try to cut out all of the steps and all of the middlemen that one, led to cost, but two, honestly led to like you not finding these different products in the different channels. Like And that seemed like a problem, and one worth tackling. Again, over the conversation today, we can probably get into the pivots and where we landed. But today, and the model that we have right now is really around creating the farmers market as a true grocery solution for New Yorkers to be able to shop from their favorite bakers, cheesemakers, produce farmers, butchers, farms, and get all of that food delivered on their terms 5 days a week, whenever they please, so that they can eat more like they want to eat.
Amazing. Yeah, can't wait to dive in. And very cool to hear your background. And were you working at the Union Square Green Market, or was it a different farmer's market?
I was working at the Union Square Green Market at the Hawthorne Valley farm stand, and it's cool also because they have one you talked about. I like fermented foods as well. That sort of a fun through line is that we actually still carry their yogurt and all of their sauerkrauts, and so for us, that's what I used to sell pre-farm to people, and now I get to continue to sell it on farm to people.
So yeah, let's dive in. Let's start with the customer-facing value prop. What areas you're covering, your SLAs as far as, is it next day or how many days out in advance you have to place your order, the pricing, the categories. So yeah, let's just talk about the consumer-facing value prop.
Yeah, of course. I think it starts with this really interesting stat that I think has been a real motivation for why we want to make farm to people as convenient and as accessible as possible. And that is one that I'll just share because I think it helps frame our conversation. When looking at New York City, not the whole country, but New York City as a whole, statistics say that about 3% of New Yorkers shop for the majority of their groceries either via the farmer's market or CSAs. That doesn't mean that me or you go as a casual, consumer to the farmer's market, once a month or whatever, but people that are dedicated to use the farmer's market as the majority of their food shopping. So that's 3%, 3 in 100 New Yorkers. Shockingly small, in my opinion, because then there's a different statistic which asks folks how they would like to shop, how do they aspire to eat? And 1 in 2, so 50 in 100 New Yorkers say that they aspire to eat more local, more healthy, more foods like the ones that you would find at the farmer's market or via a CSA. And so to me, there's this huge disconnect here of how people aspire to eat and what the reality is. And so we started thinking about what are the barriers to why that's happening, and a lot of that is time, is customization, is convenience, is the location of where the farmers markets are versus where you are, the time of day. There's so many limiting factors to why this food is harder to attain. And so with farm to people, one of the questions we ask ourselves continuously is how can we make eating this type of food, which we know people want, not prohibitive in cost, in accessibility and convenience, as much as we possibly can. Obviously, we can't control all of the factors, but what we can control, we try to control. And so for us, customers are able to order up until noon the day before. Every item in their cart is customizable. 75% of our customers are subscription customers, but you don't even have to be. We knew that subscriptions weren't for everyone. So the idea that if you're, a little bit subscription, phobic, you can come onto our site whenever you want up until noon the day before and order, just your milk, just your cheese, just your eggs, just your produce. But the majority of customers really sort of buy into this idea of a modern CSA, is how I like to refer to it. So you pay as you go. You don't need to pay all up front, which is, I think, a limiting factor of CSAs. When I was 20 and I wanted to support farms directly and I wanted to join a CSA, one of the challenges for me was, paying $1,000 up front, committing to be at a pickup location every Tuesday afternoon. And then finally, the ability to customize. And, I know that, we want to support and we want to help farmers grow a diversity of food. And through Farm to People, we do that. But we also understand that, hey, if Matt doesn't like radishes or Michael doesn't like, collards, we don't want to lose a customer over one ingredient that you might not want to get, and that might cause you to pause or skip or not join altogether. And so we added customization, we added pay as you go, and then you can pause or cancel anytime. So all of these things allow you to eat this way, the way you aspire to eat, without feeling like you're, held back in any way or given really any excuse not to commit to a better food system.
Love it. Yeah, I think that's the flexibility that a lot of people are looking for, and obviously technology can help support in a way that traditional CSAs historically hadn't been able to do. So it's at over 800 SKUs, and can maybe briefly just talk about the categories and kind of the standards you have, and then we'll talk about the supply chain. But just at a high level, what are the different types of categories you cover, and how many items there are total?
Totally. Yeah. I think for us, we've really focused on being a great solution for all things fresh. So when you think about 800 SKUs, that's a lot less than your average supermarket. So
right.
We're not trying to be like a 10,000 or 20,000 or 40,000 SKUs, supermarket where you can get every single thing that you imagine all in one place.
Non-perishable.
Yeah, exactly. Which again, a lot of that is non-perishable middle aisle stuff. And we just sort of feel like for us, one of the things that's a real challenge for New Yorkers, and especially in the age of Amazon and Instacart, where it's really, really easy to get non-perishable items delivered very inexpensively, we wanted to focus on the things that are really hard to get in high quality conveniently. And so for us, produce makes up about 50% of our average orders. So customers really, really rely on us for their local produce, their fresh produce, like their fruits, their vegetables, their herbs. We also do a tremendous amount of eggs and dairy. So think about things that are, very perishable, things that people need on a recurring weekly basis. Milk you need every, if you're a Sunday shopper, you want your milk to show up every Sunday for the week. You want all of your produce to show up for the week, your milk. And so dairy and eggs is a very high category for us, and as is meat and bread. So we really focus on the things that are high turn. We do have about 350 non-perishable staples, from tomato sauce to dry pasta to nut butters, jams, chocolates. So there is the ability to use our service for the majority of your shop, but with a strong focus on fresh, because we see that that's the thing that, it's hard to kind of find the right peanut butter for every individual. Everyone's got sort of their favorite peanut butter. And so we pick the one that we think is great, and we have a suitable peanut butter should you want it, but we don't have 10. And so those are kind of the decisions that we made around curation and around finding, what we believe is the best peanut butter. But what we really want to make sure we have is a great local milk that's delivered, fresh multiple times a week, right from the farm. And similarly with eggs and bread. I mean, we work with two of the great bakers in the city, She Wolf Bakery, which is owned by the sort of Marlowe and Sons and diner group, and they're amazing, and they're only available at farmers markets, at their restaurants, or through Farm to People. A new bakery called Starlight by a really awesome German baker, and then Bread Alone from the Catskills, which is a fully off the grid organic bakery. So again, really focusing on these products, telling their stories, and making sure that this is a product that Matt will want every week, or at minimum every other week.
Love it. Yeah, there's definitely a lot. There's a huge amount of paradox of choice when it comes to modern, non-perishables, like you said. Too many options, and better to just focus on higher margin, higher turn, fresh items. I want to really dive into the supply chain, and it was something you read on your website is that you're the fastest solution from farm to table. So I'm really curious, like, if you could unpack that, what that looks like from a supply chain perspective, as far as how you go about procuring and building this kind of, I guess I would say, highly hyper local, decentralized approach to food.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's like the challenge that we set for ourselves, and one that we want to make even more efficient over time. One of the things that we realized, and I think one of your past guests is the CEO of Mabel, and I thought it was really interesting to listen to that podcast and how the sort of like legacy distribution. Like, we think grocery is outdated, and that's something that's outdated from a customer point of view, because we as consumers go to our grocery store and interact with our grocery store. So something that's visible that we can see. Once you get into the actual like back end of what powers grocery stores, and again, consumers don't see that, just people that work in sort of the procurement and replenishment of goods for grocery stores start to understand, wow, like the web of distributors and systems that exist to power grocery stores is really antiquated. So much of it doesn't exist online. So much of it is really, quite challenging to be totally honest, to like onboard new products, to get things in a timely manner, and how to kind of operate that system. So for Farm to People, it was really trying to say, like, look, why don't we? And this is two pronged. This is again going back to the experience that David, my father and co-founder, brings to the table, is really about the fact that on the brand side, like all of the slotting fees, all of the upcharges, all of the margin sort of depletion that came from multiple distribution channels was really hurting them in order to remain competitive and affordable on the consumer side. So your price wasn't like $10 for, something that should be $6. And then on the like consumer side, it was really how to like control that price, but get enough of it back to the brand so that they were really excited about this new channel. And so for Farm to People, our idea at its core is really about how to work as directly as possible with our farmers and our makers so that the largest percent of food dollars can go back to the person making the product and not all of the various folks in the middle. And so over the past 3 years, we grew a lot during the pandemic. We uncovered a lot of flaws with the legacy platform that was powering our technology. And so an internal goal of ours, which we've realized since, is to build our own technology that allows for us to get even smarter at planning our inventory based on what we know customers are going to want, while not having like our waste skyrocket. So our food waste as a business is less than 1%. And I'll go into like our kitchen and bar and some of the partnerships that we have through our prepared meals in order to take that 1% and make it even a fraction of that. But like a traditional grocery store has between 5 and 10% food waste. We're already, at 10 to 20% of that, and then working to become close to zero as physically possible. And how we do that is, again, through the sort of modern CSA, through the subscription, through understanding our customers and what's popular and what's seasonal, and looking at data, not just week over week, but year over year, season over season. We're able to understand like how products are going to get ordered, and therefore make very data-based decisions on how much and when to order those products. And so that's really like the sort of technology that sits there in the middle between customers and suppliers, and allows for us to curate, 800 different products on a website, but make sure that we're ordering only exactly what we need of those products. And due to how we deliver Sunday through Thursday, we're also able to start getting those deliveries literally like Saturday, the day before Sunday, and then equalizing that out over the week so that like product that is delivered on Saturday from a farm could have still been in the ground on Friday and ends up on your doorstep on Sunday. And so like the traditional model has food getting, harvested many, many thousands of miles away in California or in Mexico, going to a supply house where it's put in a refrigerator, putting on a truck, where it then takes 3 or 4 days to come here, where it goes to a distributor, where it sits in a fridge and is waited to be ordered, and then it goes on a store shelf and sits there until you go into the store and you pick it. And so when I tell you that kind of model compared to ours, you're seeing how we're shrinking both that time from farm to your door, while also hopefully getting, not hopefully, definitively getting a lot more of the food dollar into the hand of the farm directly. Yeah.
Amazing. I will definitely opt for the carrot that still has the fresh dirt on it any day of the week, over the conventional.
As will I. And we've had to actually educate customers. Sorry, say that one more time.
Over the conventionally grown one that's been sitting there dead on the shelf for, who knows how long.
Same here. It's been interesting, even with customers, like educating them on, that dirt is a good thing. And even sometimes, if a little critter like a snail ends up or a grasshopper, that this is actually a signifier of the organic growing practices and actually not a problem. And it's really interesting. Customers really tell us that they not only learn more about their food, but in many cases, like learn how to cook again, or cook for the first time through using all of these products. And the diversity of their diet truly changes. I think that's of note too, because when you go to the grocery store and you're sort of in a rhythm and you're looking at a produce shelf of 50 items, I think human nature is to gravitate towards what makes us comfortable. So carrots or lettuce or peppers, but you might forego eggplant or a new squash because you don't have that sort of like comfort or familiarity of what to do with that product. And so a lot of people tell us that farm to people with the hundreds of recipes we have on our site, and also just the idea that it's an opt-out, not opt-in system. People are given sort of we call it the what's in the box email, and you get that every week, and it tells you what's best to be eating now. This is what our farmers are sending us. This is what's best to be eaten. You can, of course, like I said in the beginning, say, I don't want radishes and not get radishes. But you're going to be told that, hey, this is the best time to be eating English breakfast radishes or daikon radishes or whatever. And then it's up to the customer to say, oh, I already tried that. I don't want that again. Or to say, oh, look, let me try a daikon radish kimchi this week. Or let me try a French breakfast radish with an herb butter or whatever it is. And so I think that's kind of fun.
I agree. Yeah, really fascinating. So you would say you'd solving going back to what you said earlier in the conversation about the discovery problem and carrying a more curated selection of SKUs, the way you go about, solving a lot of that problem of like, the high barriers to entry for newer brands or farmers or whomever in the food system is through content. Would you say that's the number one way that you're solving for that?
I think we're solving for that like decently now, but like I think we have many ambitions to get even better at that. I think like right now, all of our Instagram, all of our website is really dedicated towards trying to show you like, the source of where your food comes from, the growing practices behind it. We're really trying to push people to understand what, regenerative ag, for instance, looks like, what IPM or integrated pest management means, and why it's really darn hard to find an organic apple anywhere on the East Coast, and the reasoning behind that. And then people have to make that choice. Do they want, an IPM apple that may have been sprayed but is grown within 200 miles of here, or do they want, a Washington State apple that is certified organic. And, these are things that are coming up more and more due to, one, the livelihood of a farmer that can't risk losing their whole crop. The fact that climate change has made pests so much more sort of like fierce, and like they don't necessarily die. Our winters aren't cold enough. They're not dying off during the winters, and they're posing more of a threat during growing seasons. So there's all these factors, and I think honestly, farmers are needing to adapt and needing to learn to this, and as our diners and customers. So we're trying to really like serve as the best we can, that sort of intermediary role that can convey the sort of changing food system. And again, we don't want to make choices for people. Of course, we have our standards, and that's what we put on our site. But we want to be transparent and educational. That's sort of the stance we take, and let the consumer sort of make their own choice. So on Farm to People, there are organic products, there are IPM products, there are regenerative products that are maybe not even certified, but we have gone to those farms, we've talked to the farms, we've seen how they're growing things, and so there is a level of trust, but that we take very seriously between us and the consumer, where we want them to learn and ask these great questions. I think they're important that they're coming up and bubbling up more and more, hopefully in the mainstream.
Really fascinating, and yeah, it just showcases the nuance in the gray area here. There's no, you have to make sacrifices and trade-offs here. I really like what you said about, sticking with something that is certified organic, but coming from a long way and having all those food miles and not being as fresh, and then contributing to whatever the transportation greenhouse gases are, versus something that's local and fresher, but might have some level of pesticide on it. It's really interesting.
Totally.
What we're going to have to be faced with in the future. It's only going to be harder and harder for consumers to make these kinds of choices.
Yeah, and I would say it's already become like even the organic industry. Like I think it's so interesting, even just to talk to my father about it. Someone who started his career in natural food in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And organic didn't even exist. He sort of parallels organic and regenerative. Like regenerative is this sort of like new fledgling term that people are starting to understand what that means and how your food is grown, and you could throw biodynamic into that, but these sort of more at this point in time obscure terms and definitions. When he started, like he opened a natural food store. I mean, the organic label didn't really even exist as it does today. And he watched that industry grow from nothing to, I think, as of a year or so ago, it's like an $80 billion industry. So it's massive. And as a result, though, of it becoming massive, as things do when they become massive, there's a lot of money in there. There's a lot of co-opting. There's a lot of big business that sees opportunity. And so, the concern there and the reality, is that the label becomes less and less, it becomes more and more diluted, like less and less like strong in the principle of what organic meant and means. You now have, organically farmed vegetables that are grown on massive like monoculture farms. Like, yes, they're not using synthetic pesticides, but they're using organic pesticides. And are they actually regenerating the soil, or is it just like organic carrots being planted over and over year after year after year on the same plot of land? And what's the nutritional value of that versus, a rotationally planted, area or small farm that has, carrots one season, peppers the next, lays fallow, has cover crop, like is really treated the way, we're now seeing land needs to be treated. And so I even think there's like this divide now of, organic for the sake of the label versus truly organic for the sake of like the practices that, we believe to be organic.
Well said. Yeah, that's a great. Yeah, I agree, and I see this at my farmers market. Like the farm that I get my carrots and potatoes from last weekend isn't able to be like on paper certified or organic, but they are regenerating the soil, and there's so much greenwashing going on, and a lot of people just think that they can check a box and that's going to be enough for the consumer, and the consumer just looks for the label. And this is getting even more out of hand. As you know, one of the things I'm looking at writing this week is an article about all these AI scan apps that will tell you if something is approved by a keto friendly, like food influencer or something. And they just create these very strict rules where if a barcode comes back with this specific ingredient, or it doesn't have this label, or it has this other label, that it's not good, and that we just like don't approve of it categorically. And it's like, it's such a complicated decision-making process, and one where the consumer is really flying in the dark. So yeah,
Totally.
kudos to you guys for helping, sort that out and providing those options. And like, it's not one, it's not, I don't know, it's just not so simple, it's not this or that, and nothing is really mutually exclusive.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's important, but it's understandably difficult for consumers to have the time to like really ask these questions. So we want to strive, like back to that storytelling and our mission, we want to strive as much as we possibly can to make this a really great and transparent and hopefully enjoyable, even if we can venture to say that, experience as possible. And I think the enjoyment like comes a little bit in when I bring up like, we had to move our warehouse a couple of times during the pandemic due to the growth. And when we moved to our latest warehouse in Bushwick, Brooklyn, we were sort of asking ourselves the question of how do we connect with our customers even more, and possibly at the time we were like even in a physical sense, coming out of this incredibly like isolating period where we were all so homebound and yeah, not social. And so out of the new warehouse, we actually created a kitchen and bar and event space where we've hosted, farmers and thought leaders and done our own food talks, and literally Thursday through Sunday night have our own kitchen and bar where folks can come in and have a menu that's made up entirely of the same foods that we sell and deliver to our customers, to really try to like bridge that gap as a New York brand. And I was born and raised in New York, so I'm very passionate about, not just the city having great services like Farm to People, but also having great places to congregate and to hang out, because that's what makes New York, so special to me as well.
Yeah, I've had the pleasure of having one of your burgers at the bar not too long ago. I really loved like that whole hybrid experience. I want to get into that soon, but first I want to talk about the business side of this, because I think up until this point we can all nod our heads and say we want this. This makes sense. This is a fresher, better, healthier way to eat. But we've seen so many of these online digitally native grocers just go belly up over the last few years coming out of the pandemic. Also, companies like Good Eggs really struggling with their financing, all these quick commerce startups going belly up, Fresh Direct just getting sold in a fire sale to another company that's struggling, Farmstead going under. There's just so many of them you just continually see, and it seems really damn hard. Having written about the space, I know it's really, really hard. So I really want to hear from you, let's dive, whatever the unit economics you can share of a typical basket, and like kind of the costs that come out of that, and how you think about profitability would be super helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And great references. I think like you're absolutely right. Like this is, I talk a lot about like how this industry as a whole is really still in its, well, maybe now we could call it the second or third inning, but it's still, I think, very nascent. And I don't think there's been anyone to date. And I would have used Fresh Direct as like sort of the model that has, and I'll still say that I think they have like figured it out most, right? Like, but most is not necessarily perfect, as we just saw this week.
A lot of problems along the that Hunts Point facility was a total, you
Yeah.
know what?
Totally. And also the fact that like when you look at like even pre-Getter, and I don't, maybe you know more than I, but we don't know what they sold for out of that. But even the fact that they sold to Ahold Delhaize, for 300 million after having put
300.
close to 600. They sold for 300 again?
No, they definitely did not sell for 300. I can tell you Getir's cash strapped like you have no idea. So I would
Yeah,
be
yeah, yeah.
shocked if there was any cash.
Yeah, exactly. Just a stock sale. Yeah. So like they sold for 300 to Ahold. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but
Yeah.
600. They had already raised pre that sale 600 million. So like the idea already is that business did not have a good exit, and then it had a even probably worse exit. Well, time will tell what Getter is able to do with it, but at
I think
publishing
that's
time.
safe to say. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think for us, like, I think it goes back to like the founding. Like, I was 20 years old when I started working, on this concept, and we had a totally different, the same mission, but a totally different concept at the beginning. And we really like worked year after year after year on understanding like what our value proposition was, both to suppliers, on the supply side and on the customer side. And then because we have been bootstrapped since the beginning, it was always like really driven by what does the customer want. And there were years when we were struggling because we didn't have a product market fit, to use a term everyone knows. We didn't have that, and so it required us to like really like talk a lot with like the devoted customers who continue to guide us towards, the product that really solved a problem within their lives and became something that they couldn't live without. That's an advisor of mine said, your product needs to be something that if you were gone tomorrow, I would freak out because I missed like this very essential part of my life. And you have to always strive to become, that kind of level solution for your customers. And so I think like our lack of financing and the fact that we don't have deep pockets, I think has made us be like that much more cognizant of what our value proposition is all along the way. And to your point, our unit economics. It wasn't like, oh, we can have negative unit economics for, 3 years. And then at this growth stage, like all of a sudden those unit economics will flip to profitable. And then in 5 years, we're going to have gross margins of 60%, which, if you know food, like all of that is unrealistic. And so, for us, it was really about like trying to say like, we need, in our case, 30% gross margins to be able to power this business and at the time it was at a different facility. And then, that 30% gross margin at our current facility continues to work. Obviously, there are below the line things. There are decisions that we've made in technology and marketing where we have reduced like what our profit would be to basically zero and continuously reinvested in the business out of cash flow, to try to take our business to the next step. But for us, like the basic unit economics that I think are really important is that about 50% of every dollar that is spent on our platform goes to the supply, so the cost of goods, the farmer. An additional 20% goes to, the cost of getting that product to your home, of packing it in a box, the cost of that box and that packaging. And so that's 70% of every dollar. And then, of course, below the line, we have, marketing, customer service, rent, and all of the other, miscellaneous sort of costs that come with running a business. Technology is so central to what we do. We have in many ways, invested a lot more into that than the marketing, because I think also we're a little old school in our thinking about this. We believe that the marketing and the growth of our business should come from the exceptionalism of our product. And so we've definitely ratcheted up marketing, and more New Yorkers, I think, know about us today than certainly 3 years ago. But we haven't decided, and we haven't gone full throttle into marketing our product in any super expensive way yet. And that's partially due to the fact that we still think and believe that we can hone in on our technology and on our product market fit even more and continue to see growth come through word of mouth, through strategic advertising that's really nimble, and not, I don't want to, use like I don't know what term, like kind of a little bit spray and pray, which is what it like seemed like a lot of the 15-minute quick commerce grocers were doing, which was really just blitz New York, with subway ads and, street ads and Facebook ads, like all of these things. But it just didn't feel like, when you'd ask your friends, they would be like, oh yeah, I took $60 off, but I don't know if I'm going to use it. So it was just like this kind of like acquire at any cost model that I think we're now seeing really didn't lead to retention. And we're really focused on, if anything, spending our advertising dollars on retention, on a customer came in and bought once. How do we give them a gift and help them to place a second order, and really like invest in that customer experience? Because what we see is after a customer places, 6 orders, they're really, really retained.
Love that approach. Is there anything you can share with regards to your basket sizes, as far as like, would you say they're above average of what, a typical weekly stock up would look like at a traditional retailer, or how would that kind of compare to like the general landscape of Instacart, Amazon, et cetera?
Yeah, we are above quick commerce. I believe they were like around, like $35 or $40. But sadly, we're below the sort of like Fresh Direct or Peapods of the world, which I believe are in like 120, 130 range. Right now, we're at about $75 to $80. I think we have goals. We think, it's totally feasible for our kind of like AOV growth to get up into the mid 90s to low hundreds. We believe we have the assortment. That said, we're not carrying toiletries, we're not carrying cleaning products, we're not carrying body care yet. And so to be the full shop, to be $120 order, seems a little bit more of the reach. For us, the really important metric when we interview our best retained customers is that we are one of 2 primary grocery solutions. So we don't need to be the only one. Again, like I said, we can't be everything to everyone. We don't carry enough products to have everything that you might want. But it's really important for us that, like, if you have Whole Foods or Trader Joe's as one of your solutions, that we are the other one. And when we fall into like the third or the fourth solution, that's when we start to see that like we're more susceptible to that customer churning, due to the fact that, it's hard to maintain multiple subscriptions or multiple services and keep them all in your head. And so if you're number 1 or number 2, you're harder to replace.
Makes a lot of sense. We had an interview at the height of quick commerce with a guy named Barnaby from yummy.com, which is based out here in LA, kind of quick commerce pioneer before the whole, crazy trend happened during the pandemic. And he said, which I love to quote this, is that, groceries or online grocery at least is about delivering a basket of gross profit. And if the center aisle non-perishable stuff is getting eaten away by, Amazon, who says, your margin is my opportunity, then having a $75, $80 basket of higher margin, higher perishable items that are not commodities, but insanely hard to procure, and you can really build a moat around, I would say, is, I think, a lot more valuable in an era where, they're willing to eat it. And make very little money just because they want to be so horizontally focused. And, every major big box, every major retail, grocer retailer, the Krogers, the Albertsons of the world are under attack from the Amazon threat of just being able to get those paper towels or whatever those non-perishables are at the lowest possible price. And it's always been about, the perimeter driving all of those gross profit dollars. So I think that's an important context when we think about, AOV growth and like large baskets versus small baskets. Instacart would say large baskets are anything over $75. So small baskets like what DoorDash is doing are, in the $50 range or less. So it makes a lot of sense.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, I think our basket is large in the produce. Like what we know is that, upwards of 90% of like what our customers procure for their produce needs for their week are coming from farm to people. So it's like you could almost start looking at it like category by category. Like we're doing a lot of their produce. We're maybe doing, some of their dairy, and we're maybe doing, none of their pantry. And we're sort of just trying to, like I said, like grow some of those other categories more. One of them also being like prepared foods, like besides price, which I think, every company, will deal with as like a point of churn. Like we're definitely like a very transparent and fairly priced product. That said, it still is a more expensive product than even say a Trader Joe's or certainly like a Walmart or a Costco. And so for us, like price is something where we want to price our products as fairly as possible, but we will, lose inevitably some customers due to that. The next kind of biggest headwind coming out of the pandemic besides price for customer churn is actually like time to cook. And I think that's really interesting as people need to go back to the office, as they're eating out more, as their lives become busy again to the level of sort of like, 2019, they're kind of faced with this, like, how do I eat healthfully, while kind of being limited on cooking. And so a lot of what we've kind of embarked on out of our kitchen, which is exciting, is trying to create sort of recipe shortcuts and the ability for people to still get the amazing produce or meats or different things from us, but to create shortcuts via sauces or even some prepared meal components that allow them to say put dinner on the table in 10 to 20 minutes versus 30 to 60 minutes. And we're seeing that, we believe, and we're already seeing early traction in retention and also in basket size growth. So those products generally also come with like a slightly higher ring. Again, it's like the cost trade-off. If you make the sauce yourself, it could be less expensive, but there's a time factor. And so we're in the testing period of that, but really excited about the results and also, again, continuing that mission of introducing people to more of our products and more of our farms via prepared foods. So some of these items, folks have told us, I don't know how to cook this. I don't know how to make this. And then we make it. And they're like, I really loved that product that I was too sort of intimidated to make myself.
That's really cool. I think prepared foods grew about 12% in 2022. We'll have to wait for this year's numbers. But, here in LA, this concept of super rats, which are essentially hybrid, deli counters / small selection of pantry staples and fresh produce are really taking off. I just wrote about a few of them last week. So great to see that you're investing there. Would love to just circle back to what you were discussing around your restaurant and some of the synergies with regards to, customer acquisition, reducing food waste. It's really kind of, I would assume, a huge megaphone for you guys to have it's this, it's right on this corner in Brooklyn, and it's got your big signage out there. It's kind of like a free billboard. I mean, obviously running a restaurant isn't cheap, but I'd love to, hear a little bit more about where you think those various synergies are.
Yeah, absolutely. I joke that we went from one terribly low margin, difficult to run business to potentially the only one that may be worse.
Oh, okay.
But no, I think for us, I think it's exactly what you said. For us, it wasn't like, let's get into the business of being a restaurant to make a lot of money. I mean, that was not the impetus. The idea really was to connect more and connect more personally and to our customers and create this sort of like physical billboard, through hospitality, through educating our customer, through giving, impromptu warehouse tours to folks that come in so that they're really able to see like the ins and outs of, what it looks like to deliver, thousands of New Yorkers, weekly boxes. And so, it's fun to tell customers that are sitting there in that front room that like, at the end of the evening, all the tables are folded away, and then those glass windows are actually our loading docks, and starting at 5 a.m. where our deliveries are taking place, and that the 3,000 square foot walk-in cooler is like literally like 100 steps away from them, and that our chef is not shopping, in the traditional sense for the types of food through big food service providers, but is getting that food, from 10 steps from the kitchen in that same walk-in. And to really I think some people, I think the best instance is when people are really stunned by one, how simple the concept is, but how complicated the food system is, and how we really try to introduce folks to the inner workings of it in a hopefully fun and engaging way. And then, I think we want to become a destination for, we've done farm dinners as well. So we have the normal evening menu, but we also use the space as an activation for farm dinners that are we did one with the Roots to River farm, a farm that we work with, where literally 95% of the ingredients on that menu came from one 13-acre farm about an hour and a half from New York. We had a food talk that was called The Future of Food, and it was done with a friend of mine, Larissa Zimberoff, who is an amazing author and writer. And she did a panel with me that had actually that same farm, Micahel from Roots to River. It had Irving Fain, the founder and CEO of Bowery Farming, and it had Dan Barber of Blue Hill at Stone Barns fame. And it was just this really amazing, eye-opening conversation that our customers got to experience around, the various ways that kind of we're pushing farming and food into the 21st century. And some of it I think is misguided, and some of it I think is great. And we got to debate that for an hour and a half in a physical space, coming out of a pandemic, where I think that kind of feeling of debate and in the physical form was kind of a beautiful thing. And so we're trying to continue that, every single week, where people come in and get to meet friends, meet people from our team, and interact with the brand in a way that you're certainly not getting to do with Getter, and in a way that you never got to with Fresh Direct over 20 years of existence.
That's really cool to bring it all home. And Larissa's doing great work. Also a friend of Hungry. And I think you and I will have to talk offline about vertical farming and what our various opinions are there. I definitely have some experience going to see Plenty out here in Compton, and we'll just leave it at that. But Micahel, this has been really amazing. As we kind of come towards the end of the conversation, I would love to kind of have you talk about looking forward into the future. I feel like we're at a really interesting juncture right now, where online groceries at 12%, so it's still highly underpenetrated. But we're seeing more M&A activity in this space. Kroger Albertsons merger on the horizon. We have the centralized model, which supports one kind of way of thinking, or one that is, I would say for you guys, is more decentralized, hyperlocal. How do you think about, what's your vision for farm to people over the next, decade or so? And how do you think that model is able to help meet consumers where they are better than another potential solution?
For sure. Yeah. What a great question. And definitely, wow, the past, 3 years of change and consolidation and fundraising in the sort of mainstream, and even bringing up Kroger and Albertson, I think it all shows that the current food system as it exists is really broken. And I think it's not just broken for consumers. It's the fact that Albertsons and Kroger need to merge, to sort of stay competitive with Walmart. It's just all insane. And what does this do to independent retailers? I think about them, and then I think about small chains as well that make up a a lot of, businesses around the country and employ a lot of people. And I just sort of think about that. And then I think about the model that they provide for consumers and how ultimately, like, people are less healthy than they want to be. They're not finding the options that they want. And so slowly all of this is becoming really, monopolized and without any clear benefit for consumers. It's really just like this sort of race to stay as cheap and as fast and as convenient as possible, but not really with us in mind. And so my vision, like I think the way you say it, decentralized, is really a beautiful way to say it. I think the future of food and farming needs to really be like local or regionalized. And so for Farm to People, we look a lot at how do we use New York? And, I think we're unique in that way that we really haven't tried to ship our food across the country. We're really not trying to be everywhere all at once and have our product suffer. We really believe that, New York is our proof of concept. It's where we want to test our model, where we want to see our model really like grow and thrive and continue to make more and more sense, so that over time we can take this sort of food hub concept and the technology that powers it and what we're doing here. And then whether it's ourselves or with partners around the country, figure out how to give, other cities this same idea and support the hopefully growing, we need it to be growing. So I will work and talk to as many folks and farmers as I can to grow other really strong regional food systems. But if we Farm to People can sort of, to use a technology term, be sort of like the farmers market or CSA, operating system or OS, that can help to provide all of the different pieces to that puzzle that make it economically viable and better for the consumer, that's really our long-term vision. And so, it's as simple as when you talk to a farmer or a maker, what do they enjoy most? Why did they start farming or start baking bread or start doing those things? It's to do exactly that, to bake bread, to farm the land, not to deal with customer service, last mile delivery, technology, marketing. Those were not reasons that someone became a farmer or a baker or a butcher or, And so we really see it as our duty and as something that we want to do best, which is really to create that operating system so that farmers can farm and get paid fairly for what they're doing. And so consumers can then benefit from that, amazing food in a really I want to say it, I don't know if we're there yet, but in an as a convenient way as, Amazon Fresh or Instacart, where you don't have to sacrifice your values for convenience or the other way around. We're not there yet, but that's the sort of, North Star and something that I think if people, believe in and kind of work with the product that we have now and continue to ask us for new products and new systems and new delivery days, and the demand is there, that demand is what is providing literally the funding and the infrastructure for us to continue to build on top of it.
Love it. Love the mission. And we'll be cheering you on from LA. Please come here. If people want to find you, what's the best way to reach out? Anything you want to plug, now's your opportunity.
Well, first, thank you so much, Matt, for this opportunity. You already have just the most amazing produce in California, and I love. I definitely wish and aspire to deliver folks in New York that same sort of nutritional value with every delivery. And I love your platform and what you stand for at Hungry and what you're creating and the different entrepreneurs and companies that you're spotlighting. So major shout out to you as well. For folks, I definitely check out farmtopeople.com and check out at Farm to People on Instagram. Those are the best ways to see what we're up to. I'm at Micahel Robinov. It's very much like a personal Instagram, but I do respond to DMs. So if people want to hit me up and continue the conversation or have ideas, I love talking to folks and I love sharing what we're building. So yeah, appreciate your time, Matt.
Okay, awesome. Slide into his DMs, everybody. Okay. Well, thanks again. And can't wait to see the the decentralized food landscape of the future.
Thanks for tuning in. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe wherever you're listening to this podcast. And if you're curious to get a first-hand look at the cutting edge of food and tech, check out hungry.tv. That's Hungry with no U, where you can join in on live conversations like these or sign up for the free weekly newsletter.